So I've recorded this many times, and let's try it one more time. If you played DaggerHeart or you're curious about DaggerHeart, that's probably why you're here. Critical Role's new tabletop RPG game that's supposed to replace and or take out Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, or Pathfinder. Sorry to say, I'm going to bury the lead on this one. Not going to happen. In attempting to review DaggerHeart, there are many critiques and suggestions my players and I made while attempting to play the introductory adventure along with a homebrew high-level game. So I'm going to break this into a few pillars of play that we came up with for DaggerHeart. First up, resource management. Pretty big in DaggerHeart of you having to manage all of the various tokens and resources you get just so that your player character works. DaggerHeart feels more like a combination of Settlers of Catan combined with Monsters of the Week. Players are constantly working to replenish abilities such as hope, hit points, and stress as they inevitably prepare for combat or those narrative moments that require action rolls, duality rolls, hope rolls. It's mentioned as a couple different things in the playtest. Well, each group I played with noticed that if we stuck to the rules as written, or only when the material called for the duality dice, it'd only be in high-stress situations when they needed their resources the most. Players enjoyed when I broke from this narrative-based roll mechanic to one similar of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, when they roll for investigation, persuasion, insight, or history checks, all while knowing that each time they rolled with fear, I was collecting tokens to cash in against them at a future date. Now, although there is an element of fairness to being able to see each person's resources that actively go up and down during the gameplay, players noticed, and this is from the rough draft nature of DaggerHeart, that the resource management did not seem balanced or fair across all classes and subclasses. Some had killer move combos that required a small fee in order to execute, while others were stymied by action rolls and losing their resources as they played. Now for DM resource management, the DM is working to collect fear and action tokens while managing a system of countdown abilities and narrative devices used against your party. As combat increases in difficulty and tiers, the number of countdown abilities also increases, and the need for the DM to be tracking multiple resources takes away from the rules light system that DaggerHeart said it was. And that takes us to combat. Combat felt very easy in the playtest material, as difficulty numbers were at or below the average of a 2d12 system. That's a 13. So in player modifiers, abilities, and the ability to assist with advantage was given to players. This, of course, made the players feel invincible as they were hitting a lot of the time. However, taking into account this is a system people are learning, many felt that the evasion was too low for many of the classes, especially as they played through higher tiers. And the damage threshold caused a level of interpretation and communication that made it a little bit more complicated at higher levels. Each group settled into a turn-based combat to assist with, since the option to jump in when it's narratively relevant caused everyone to suggest other players go instead of them, or didn't plan out their turns as they were put on the spot. Players in all tiers required additional rule discussions around abilities, as many of the general terms used in those abilities were kind of up for debate. And all players worried that new players or power players would attempt to misuse or purposely misrepresent the abilities of their characters. What each group liked about combat was the use of action tokens and rolling with fear to change the flow of battle. Many of the seasoned DMs I played with liked how this improved the action economy of the foes and limited the ability for the players or the DM to overtake battle. Storytelling. Personally, many of the mechanics within the playtest material are similar to the home rules I already use, so it was nice to see them codified in this PDF. These rules being a collaborative and narrative way to world build, where the players have agency in crafting the world around them. One phrase that came out that the players liked was, "What would you expect to find here?" Players gave detailed descriptions of items, systems, scenery, and resources I didn't have to plan or create, allowing a natural yes and or yes but situation that helped create in-depth locations and items. However, there's a dark side to this. Even though this did not happen in my playtests, and I have the experience to navigate these discussions. Everyone voiced their concern around the min-max players or metagamers who would use the collaborative world building to get resources they wanted, or power-hungry DMs to shoot down ideas because it didn't match what they envisioned of the area. But most likely this game isn't for them. The overall mechanics were interesting. The resource management, deck building, and fluid nature of how to accumulate these resources is not for everyone, and needs to be balanced a little bit more, obviously, before the final product is released. But the biggest issue many of my players had, and myself, was the amount of time it took us to translate the rules. And this is what I mean. I'll use distance as an example. Although in the playtest material it does give you a range for your distances, but melee, very close, close, far, and very far have a variable range to them. So although there are the general guidelines for distances, many of my players preferred to set the distance at the max distance. And my players felt that this translation or interpretation wasn't needed, especially in combat or high-risk situations where we're trying to make the battle go and flow. Another one was group and target zones for foes and some abilities. Many abilities of foes and players have group, or foes within a distance amount. This vagueness compounded the translation and potential for miscommunication in play. After a player attempted an ability, or we stopped combat to clarify the ability, we then made our compromise on the ruling to move forward. Basically, we set distances and number of targets so that battle could continue. Next was gold and cost of weapons. This was a bit of either just get rid of it or vastly improve what you have, as it's clearly still under construction. The handfuls of gold made rewards using gold kind of meaningless, or the community traits that rewarded gold seemed diminished in comparison to other community abilities. One gets advantage and one just gets a handful of gold. I kind of would go with the advantage. Players voice that if we are in a resource management game, then we would like a standard unit of measurement for these resources as well. 10 pieces of gold, not that hard to track. And this kind of goes to the last point, up to the players and DM. Throughout the playtest material, it tells you to be collaborative, world build, and if something doesn't work, change it. With the amount of rules or suggestions that go into advising DMs and players to be collaborative, or have an open communication around narrative gameplay, it felt like if it's up to us to decide, making rules and modifying the game as we see fit, then why not play a different game that we like that has mechanics that we like? We all acknowledge that, yes, it's a playtest, and looked over app issues and some of the resource management issues, and the lack of certain finite rules so that we could have fun and still play. But at the end of the day, we can do collaborative world building in any system, and this one just didn't hold our interest. Now I have more thoughts on the systems, ease of ability to homebrew, and how they lay out the acts of a one-shot, and then also the ability to transfer monsters and other foes from D&D and Pathfinder into DaggerHeart is pretty easy once you take a look at it. And if you want to know more or you have any questions, definitely feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try to get those. And as always, be kind and roll well.